Okay, so hello everybody. Welcome to Girls Right Now Live Unmuted. Thank you so much for joining us all tonight for tonight's pre-show. And I'm Amanda, a Girls Right Now mentee.
And I'm Kat, Amanda's mentor. We are your MCs for tonight, and we are so hyped to be here live with tonight's Agent of Change, Honoree Naima Coster, author of What's Mine Yours, which I have the book here. I read this last week, and it was honestly like, I feel like sometimes the rave reviews are not always what they seem, and the book was honestly like so good. It was really, really great.
So to get going, welcome Naima. We're so excited to have this time to talk about writing, mentorship, and community with you.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here and chat with you all.
Hi, sorry, I'm
back. Oh, you're good?
Welcome back.
Yeah, good. I don't know what just happened. The whole screen went black.
No problem. So since you're back, if you want to ask the first question, Kat.
Yeah, totally. Oh, so what I was saying before was you've captured like such beautifully like complex characters here. I think your like world building was so amazing. So I guess one of our first questions was what were the kind of books that you were reading when you were young? And I guess like what impact did they have on your writing now? Like what books did you love when you were a teen?
Yeah, when I was a teen, I loved lots of different things, but one book that was especially important to me was Breath Eyes Memory by Edwidge Danticat, which is a novel that was given to me by my high school English teacher. It's a mother-daughter story. It's a difficult mother-daughter story set in Brooklyn and Haiti. And it was the first book I read where there was a strong sense of how life before in this immigrant family was always present in the new life in Brooklyn. And it meant so much to me. And it was a book where I saw myself represented, although the story in that book isn't the story of my family. And it gave me the sense that there might be a place for my books one day. So that book was huge. Angie Cruz was a big writer for me. And still is, Patricia Engel, lots and lots of people.
I'm a huge fan of Edwidge Danticat. My dad's side is Caribbean, and I feel like it's always so good to see yourself represented on the page. Yeah. Amanda, you want to take a question?
Yeah, sure. So what kind of mentors, I guess especially in regards to writing mentors, have you had or in the past or even present now over the years? And is there like a specific mentor that you had that you can say like really changed, I guess, your outlook on writing as a whole?
Yeah, well, I'll share two. One is that high school English teacher who gave me Breath Eyes Memory. Her name is Mary Frash, and she just encouraged me to pursue writing just because I loved it. And that was a good enough reason. Sort of as at a time when people were trying to encourage me to do things because they might be profitable or prestigious or stable. She was like, you seem to love writing, so maybe you should do that. And so I found permission in that, and that was really important. And then when I was in grad school, I worked with the writer Christina Baker Klein, who's a wonderful novelist. Her most recent book, The Exiles, came out this summer. And I remember she told me, she said, you should write a novel. And I said, oh, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that one day. And she said, no, you should do it right now. And that was something that I always thought was for my future self. And she said, why not now? And the book that I started ended up being my debut, Halsey Street.
Yeah, I think me still being in high school, I can definitely relate to like that, having that like English teacher, especially because I feel like they often give you like a lot of room to like showcase what you really want to say, even if it strays a little bit from the topic at hand.
Yeah, totally. I'm glad you have that.
Yeah. What got you from this is a story that needs to be told, or this is a great idea, to actually sitting down and writing this one? So it sounds like the last one was sort of your English teacher gave you that push. So how'd you get here to writing What's Mine and Yours? Sorry, and Yours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I knew that I wanted to keep writing because I'm happier when I'm writing. Like I feel more myself. I feel a deep sense of like satisfaction, but also like curiosity when I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen next in the novel or with my characters. So I knew that I just wanted to write something. But in terms of what to write, that was sort of harder. So I just give myself assignments. Like I'm just like, what's my next book going to be? It's going to be this. And then I feel my way through it. And the ideas for this book came from a lot of different places. It came from the reporting of Nicole Hannah-Jones about school segregation and educational opportunity. It came from these two mothers who I knew that I wanted to write about, these two characters who I'd invented, but I didn't know where to put them. So I thought maybe I'll put them in this novel about schools and the different connections that happen across lines of class and race in an integrating school.
And this started as a short story, right?
It did, but I didn't know that I was working on a novel. Like I just sort of wrote it. I wrote a short story when I was snowed into my house for 3 days and like couldn't get out to go to work or do anything. And I was alone and my house was cold. So I was like, I'm gonna write a story about a woman who's like cold and isolated. And her story is very different than my story, but the story takes place over 3 days. I was stuck at home for 3 days and I thought that it was just sort of done. And then I decided to revisit the characters.
So I guess kind of going off that, since it started off as like a short story, what like further prep and research did you have to put in to like, I guess, be able to fully fledge it out into being a novel?
That's a great question. Well, I think where I start is curiosity about my characters and thinking more about each of the characters in that story, including the peripheral ones. So it's about a mom and her 3 daughters. She's a white woman living in North Carolina, and her Colombian husband is in and out of her life. So she has these 3 half Latina daughters who all identify differently and are read in the world differently. So I spent a lot of time thinking about them, like how they move through the world, what their experiences are, and how they all feel about each other. Like, how does each sister feel about every other sister? How do they each feel about all of the different adults in their life? And that's one of the ways I think about character, not just like a set of innate qualities, but like what are all of their relationships and who are they in all of those relationships? So that's where it always starts for me, like the space between 2 people.
Yeah, that's very important when you're trying to like develop these characters into like actual people, that people can find themselves into.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you're happier when you're writing. So I guess what's your favorite thing about, I guess, doing creative work and being a writer and working in a creative field?
Well, I feel 2 things. One, I feel I'm not a big puzzle person. I don't like actual puzzles, but I feel like writing fiction is like trying to figure out a puzzle, like figuring out what the pieces are, how to bring them together. And so in that way, I find it like really engaging. Like I'm not bored when I do it. So it's like feels like a good way to spend my time. Like I just find it like stimulating. And then the other thing is, I think that in different periods of my life, I have like a set of questions or concerns, like things that I'm constantly kicking around day to day. And then a novel or a story is a great way to like deliberately kick around those questions or themes and figure something out. So I don't always do that on purpose. I don't say, what are the questions and themes in my life right now? But I think that, the ideas that occur to me come from really deep, intimate places. And then something about fiction helps me look at it differently than if, say, I were writing memoir.
Okay, so since you're here with us right now, we were wondering, in your regards to being here and being in like this space right now, why do you feel it's important to, I guess, support girls right now? And what does that really mean to you? And how does it relate to you and your work?
Mm-hmm. Well, for me, it definitely comes back to the importance of the relationship that I have and had with my mentee, Yvonne, when we were together at Girls Right Now, and the way that I thought that the relationship and the work of Girls Right Now helped us to remain connected to the importance of writing. And maybe there are people who are always connected to the importance of writing, but I'm not one of those people who always feels that making stuff up is inherently valuable. Although I love books, and I love the way it feels to write. So for me, being connected to a community of people who also find the value in books and in writing is constantly affirming, in a way that isn't always true. Like I know that when I was a young person, nobody like wanted me to be a writer. They were like, oh no, don't do that. Like, do something else, like be an engineer, but also like, don't disclose these like opinions and feelings. And because no matter what genre you're writing, I think you're like revealing something about your mind, you know, and that's exposing. And I came from a family that was big on secrets and propriety. And so it's always been important to me to have other people who see the value, because they remind me when I'm not always connected. And I hope to do the same for other people.
Yeah, I relate to that a lot, actually.
Yeah. I think one of the coolest things about What's Mine and Yours is that you're dealing with these really intricate topics of like race and class and identity, which I think people can say to sort of take a shallow or myopic, I guess, lens when they talk about them, but your characters are so strong and real and flawed that it, you know, they really carry the book. And I guess I was wondering, like, do you have something that inspired sort of these characters that I think are so like richly textured and nuanced and interesting? And definitely my favorite part of reading the book.
Thanks, Kat. Well, you know, I think that what really carried me through the book was like two sets of characters. So the two mothers who the book focuses on, I saw them as like two women who felt that they have thwarted potential and weren't able to go as far as they wanted to in life. So they fixate on their children's futures and opportunities for them in a way that makes them miss other opportunities for connecting with their kids. They're so sort of fixated on removing obstacles for them, which comes from a place of love, but isn't always what honors the needs of the kids. And then the actual kids who find themselves in this integrating high school, and for different reasons feel like outsiders. That young woman I mentioned, Noelle, who's half Latina, she's a white presenting Latina, so she feels alienated in the school. And then this young man, G, who enters the school, who's a sensitive, anxious young Black man who's an outsider because of his race, but also because he has a difficult family history that he's learned to cover up. And then in their friendship and the connection between them, they find a bond like family. And so this book is a lot about like family of origin, chosen family, and the ways that families break and reform.
We have a hand, I think, raised.
Yay!
Yasmin, if you wanted to unmute, or if you can't right now, you can even type it in the chat. It's up to you.
I'll just off my camera real quick too. First of all, I want to say I love your hair.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, thanks so much. Likewise.
Second of all, my question is going to be, earlier you were talking about progressing from like short stories to novels. So how do you perceive the very like writer's block of it all? And how do you feel that it affects things moving forward with that?
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for your question. Something that helps me is acknowledging that there are other things that help the writing besides the writing. So sometimes that's reading, sometimes that's going for a walk, sometimes that's talking to a friend, sometimes that's giving myself something to think about in the shower or as I make dinner or whatever it is. Like sometimes when I sit down in the chair with the pressure of writing sentences, I can't do it, right? Like I can't solve every challenge or answer every question in the 2 hours I decided to sit down and write. But if I just keep it alive, right? And I think about it when I'm watching a movie or just going about life, life can provide some like inspiration, you know, like this. I mentioned the work of Nicole Hannah-Jones. Like I first encountered her work in 2015, like listening to a podcast. And I wasn't like, I need a novel idea, you know? I was just sort of paying attention to the world. So I think knowing that you don't have to be writing to be figuring out something for your creative work really helps me get unstuck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions from the group? If not, I think there's one more left, Amanda. If you want to go to it.
Okay, so if nobody else has any questions, I guess a good way to wrap this up would be what advice would you give to a young writer who's hoping to be published?
So specifically to be published, that's a good condition. Well, I'd say there's lots of things that are helpful. We've already talked about community.
Mhm.
And I think that that community is really critical because publishing is a whole other ball game and can be filled with setbacks, uncertainty, rewards, whatever it might be. So, when I was trying to publish my first novel, there were a lot of setbacks and obstacles that I encountered. And I had a friend who was also having a tough time selling her first novel. And so we would meet up in a coffee shop and write together. We'd work on the books that we felt like no one else wanted. And then just that like community and showing up and seeing her and having her see me was just like a wonderful way to keep showing up for a friend, but also for myself. And also to pay attention to what I would tell her when she was discouraged and having a hard time, and make sure that I spoke to myself the same way. So I think definitely community to commiserate when there's like a setback or a disappointment, but then also like to celebrate and like cheer you on, like I think that something that I've been unlearning is playing it small when I have an accomplishment or like playing something off. And I think a good community can model for you like how to celebrate yourself. And if you like already know how to do that, great, then you can like celebrate those people. But that's something that I had to learn. So I think definitely just having like other writers and loved ones to go through it with. And then I'd also say striking a balance between taking risks and pushing yourself, and then also not rushing. So what do I mean by that? I mean, like, it's hard to ever feel like something is done. And so there's some value in just like pushing yourself and like putting something out into the world, even if it's not perfect, because perfect isn't the goal and it's an impossibility. But I'd say the other side of that is in myself. Sometimes I've been impatient. Like I want something published just so I know that one day I will have something published for this book. And so I also think like there's no rush, and to also like take time and do it when you're ready. So some balance between like that boldness that's required to send stuff out, but also like the confidence that if it's like not this month and it's next month, or it's not this year, it's next year, 5 years from now, that's okay. That's okay.
I really love what you said about like not harping on the fact of it being perfect. I read this post someone made. They're a tattoo artist in Brooklyn, and they were just like kind of frustrated about this idea of how like people come in to get a tattoo expecting it to be perfect, because it is art at the end of the day, and art isn't perfect. So I think that relates a lot to what you just said.
Totally. Yeah, and something doesn't have to be perfect to have meaning,
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. And also about showing up, because I feel like everybody here is showed up. We may all be in very different places right now, but just the fact that we're all here is pretty important nonetheless.
Yeah, absolutely.
If not, I just wanted to say you said that you need to celebrate your wins, and congratulations on having this really amazing book out. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for having me. I can't wait for the show.
Yeah.